If you guys have been watching this channel for any length of time, you have probably heard me say that what we do here on YouTube is simultaneously the realest and the fakest thing in the world. There's a lot to that. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think about that more and more now because so many of the people who are part of the generation of YouTubers who came on, who broke into this digital demimonde of aspiring vegan activists who came on at the same time as me, more and more of them are dropping out. Some of them are quitting entirely. Some of them are deleting their channels. Some of them have just lost their taste for the game. So their channel kind of sits there in limbo. But you can tell their heart's just not in it. They're no longer in the struggle. They're no longer dreaming that dream. And they're no longer in it to win it. Now, back when I first started this channel, people used to ask me a lot of questions about real activism, about real activists, and people, including me to some extent, were seeking out real activism and real activists on YouTube. It was very natural. We're all seeking something real. I mean, we're all responding to and getting excited about something real. Again, this part of that dynamic of simultaneously the realest and the fakest thing. But something I've been upfront about all along, and that I still got to say day after day, is that YouTube is not activism. I don't mean that in a bad way. The positive aspect of that is that I feel that what we're doing here on YouTube can create a foundation for future activism. It can be a basis for real activism in the future. In many ways, the debates we're having right now on YouTube are a beautiful prelude to a real political movement. And no political movement in the history of the world has ever had this kind of preparation. If you think there was ever this kind of open-ended democratic discussion when people were first organizing a labor union, or when people were first organizing anti-war protests in the 1960s, or when the various fractious and infighting groups pursuing feminist goals or pursuing, advancement of African Americans, civil rights for black people, there was nothing like this for any other movement in the history of the world. So even if you see this as a prelude to activism and not real activism itself, it's still a beautiful thing. And I mean, the sense in which I think it's baffling to many members of the audience and many people even participating in it, many people who are coming here on camera, is the extent to which what we're doing is performance and even performance art, and yet at the same time is very much about our real feelings, our real convictions, our real aspirations, our real sorrows, our real struggles, etc. What we're doing here is performance, but it's performance with a purpose. Now, one of the illustrations of this for me, and some people get it and some people don't and some people never will, was that so many people in my audience just freaked out when I defended Saoirse Morava. So there's no point recapitulating what happened. But the point was, what I understood implicitly but profoundly when I was watching Saoirse's videos, which I'm not a fan of and I'm not particularly glorifying or defending, but whenever I saw Saoirse on the internet, I recognized that what she is doing is a performance. It's a type of performance. Now, it doesn't mean she's an actress reading a script. It doesn't mean she's playing a character that's completely different from who she is in real life. To a very real extent, what she does in these videos, like where she was ridiculing PewDiePie, where she was starting these kind of online disputes, to a very real extent, the character she's portraying overlaps with who she really is. Maybe it's an exaggeration of certain aspects of her character. It's a caricature. It's a self-parody. But what she's doing is very much a performance, and I completely understood that. And it baffled me that other people were condemning her as a radical, as an extremist, or actually thinking she was crazy, actually thinking she was insane on the basis of this performance that they did not understand as performance. Now, several people, not a huge number, but several people have sent me emails since then thanking me for that video. And each of those emails are along the same lines. There are people who wrote to me who said, this is a summary, but this is really close to this. It said, look, when I first heard your video defending Saoirse, I thought you'd lost your mind. They say back at that time, I thought Saoirse actually was insane, actually was out of control, actually was bad for the vegan movement. And I thought they thought, I was out of touch with reality because I regarded Saoirse as portraying a character, as doing something phony and fun and provocative that wasn't real. And then they say, with some variations, They've later seen Saoirse on live streams or had conversations with her. They've somehow interacted with her, and it really sunk in for them that what I was saying was true, and not just a little bit true. This was, in a profound and important way, really true. That what they were seeing on YouTube, this is a performance. And again, interesting thing is, performance doesn't mean it's entirely fake. Doesn't mean it's imaginary. Doesn't mean it's totally separate from your real life. I think what we do on YouTube in a really dynamic way still is part of our real lives. It still is about our real lives. And yet, in this weird way, it's not real life. There was something completely parallel. Again, somebody I don't really defend, somebody whose content I'm not really a fan of, is Vegan Gains. Now, one reason why I'm not a fan of it is just some of it's... thematically, it's not about stuff that interests me. I don't care about MMA. I don't care about video games. A lot of the stuff he's into is just stuff I don't care for. A lot of people freaked out back when I defended him, again, in a very parallel way, where people thought Vegan Gains was insane. They thought he was bad for the movement. They thought what he was doing was toxic and causing conflict and dissension, what have you. And the people who really thought he was insane, I said to them, no, I really think he's very psychologically normal, especially knowing his background as I do. He comes from Toronto, a lot of other things about him that I know. I said, look, I regard him as psychologically normal, but I regard what he's doing as a kind of performance. And you in the audience, are really wrong if you're drawing psychological conclusions. You're engaging in a kind of amateur psychoanalysis on the basis of a scripted performance, of him playing a character. Again, is the character totally different from who he is in real life? No. I think in some ways he is really engaging. Again, the closest thing is self-parody. When Vegan Gains talks about how much he hates babies, how much he hates children, obviously, to some extent it's true, and to some extent he's actually ridiculing himself. He's not just exaggerating that tendency in his character, he's actively making fun of himself. So again, I understood that. So in many ways, I understood the way in which what I was seeing on the internet was simultaneously very real and very fake. And look, guys, this applies to me as well. What I do on camera, I just uploaded a very passionate 30-minute video talking basically about gender equality, kind of my first wave feminist view of the world. I'm not a third wave feminist, but I got some compliments from woman viewers saying that what I was talking about was real feminism, flattering me by saying that my perspective was really feminist in a meaningful sense. Okay, thank you. I can take a compliment. In that video, I'm quite passionate. I'm quite pissed off. At several points, I do laugh at myself. There's an element of self-parody. I'm aware of how ridiculous it is. Is this real or is this fake? There is a sense in which it still is a performance. In real life, you would never sit down with a friend. And again, this stuff is all unscripted. It's amazing me. Some people still think my videos are scripted. 100% unscripted, 100% spontaneous, and talk for 30 minutes solid with passion and conviction and emotion on a topic like that you care about. It never happens in real life, right? And again, there's this weird line you walk where it's simultaneously the realest and the fakest thing in the world. I really feel that way. And actually, at some points in that video, just using it as an example, because the most recent video I uploaded, I cut myself off. I was going to talk more about personal experiences and personal convictions and personal emotional engagement with the issue. It's like, okay, let's get back on track. And yet, if somebody watched this stuff and thought I was actually emotionally out of control, as with Saoirse Morava, as with Vegan Gains, I'd have to say to them, don't you realize there's a theatrical element to this? Don't you realize there's a heightened life element to this? There's a sense in which all of this stuff, just because it is being performed on camera, that's I guess the dynamism of what we do here on YouTube. It's simultaneously so real and so fake. It's about my real life, and yet it's not my real life. It's a part of my real life, and yet it never will be real life, right? So I'm going to read here a little interaction I had today. Really spontaneously written message I sent to somebody on the internet back and forth. But I sent this to somebody, coming back to the first issue I mentioned, sent this to somebody who has basically quit vegan YouTube. He's lost the aspiration, he's lost the dream, and pause on that for 1 second. There's so many reasons to quit. But something else I was saying earlier I wanted to come back to, and I'm coming back to it now. If you were here for real activism, then that in itself is a reason to quit. Although what I said before is positive in saying this is not real activism, but this can set a basis for real activism, by the same token, it's not real activism. So if that was what you're looking for, it's not here. And I totally understand why the people who are real activists either quit or minimize their engagement with this medium. Because this is not real activism. It's never going to be, right? And on the other hand, if you're after real fame or real money, there are all kinds of reasons why people get involved in this, and then they lose their belief in that. They lose their passion for that, and they quit. And again, to refer back to the last video I put up on this channel, it's more than 30 minutes long. But at the end, I talk about my real motivations for being here, which again, it's very real. It's very sincere. And I say, look, I'm in this for the movement. The reason why I'm doing this. It is a performance, but it's a performance with a purpose, you know? The only reason I'm coming online and talking to you for 30 minutes about feminism and gender equality and these other issues, even though it may seem like a stretch, believe me, it's not for money, it's not for fame, and again, it's not activism. But I'm doing it for the movement, and in my mind, from my perspective, I'm doing that for a movement that does not even exist. Yet. So I wrote to this dude on YouTube, and I said, it's sad, man. You lost the will. I lost the will for certain types of shit, but not for YouTube. I've still got the will for this YouTube thing, man. YouTube is a lot realer and a lot more rewarding than all the bullshit I was dealing with before. Academia, charity work, etc. So he writes back to me. I'm leaving him anonymous. He just wrote back to me and said, what does it matter if you want to do YouTube or not? I replied, it changes everything in my life, man. I'm moving to Dahong. I'm moving out to the border with Myanmar. I'm moving to Dahong without a single friend in the world. I'm moving there with nothing but my backpack, a bread machine, and 140 kilograms of weights. I'm going to be extremely alone in a place where nobody speaks English. YouTube means a lot to me. I don't front. At some point, Bruce Wayne became a fake persona, and Batman became who the guy really was. He's really Batman, but he pretends to be Bruce Wayne. When I'm teaching classes in a university in China, do you think I'm being Batman, or do you think I'm being Bruce Wayne? When I'm talking this talk on YouTube, do you think I'm being Batman, or do you think I'm being Bruce Wayne? The mask becomes the face. Now, I wrote that in about 10 seconds, and I didn't think anything about it. I did other stuff in my room. I'm packing up now to leave town. And I went back and looked at it and was like, there's something there for even me to think about. As I say, what I do here is a kind of performance. And thus, in some sense, it never can be real. It's like there's a difference between talking about philosophy and philosophy. There's a difference between talking about politics and politics. There's a difference between talking about activism and activism. And there's a difference between performance and, a real relationship, a real conversation, a real anything, right? But then there are other contrasts we have to consider. What you get from me here on YouTube, even though it is heightened life, even though it's more emotional, it's kind of exaggerated, it's more of a performance. Like, if I was sitting with you in a cafe talking about feminism, the conversation wouldn't go that way. For one thing, I'd listen to you. I wouldn't just talk for 30 minutes solid. But the level of intensity, the level of emotion, even the level of stupidity. Because part of what I do here is satirical and humorous. I've been laughing a lot on camera. Sometimes I cry on camera, right? Maybe later in this video, I'll break down weeping. Watch for it. In so many ways, you can say that this is unreal or this is merely performance. But compared to what? If you actually came to the university when I'm teaching class, who is that guy? Who is the guy standing there at the podium teaching a class in a university context? In some ways, it's the real me, and in some ways, it's not. And most of you people watching this video, no matter what job you do, you probably have a job where 8 hours a day, are you Batman or are you Bruce Wayne when you're on the job, no matter what your job is? And to some extent, do you even know, or do you have to switch between a public and a private persona? And the really crazy thing about YouTube is that anyone who knows me in my fake identity, my professional identity, who knows me in the slightly phony way I live my life when I'm earning my living, they can come on YouTube anytime and see the other side of me, right? It's up here on the internet forever. I'm going to be teaching classes in China. Any one of my coworkers, any one of the other professors can come on YouTube and watch these videos and see who I really am, in a sense. Is it Batman or is it Bruce Wayne, right? Any one of my students can come on the internet and see me criticizing Freely and Durian Rider, see me talking about effective activism, can see me talking to university students. I have some videos in here where I'm talking to university students, but when I'm talking to them about vegan activism, I'm not talking to them at all the way I talk to them when I'm on the job. I'm actually talking about how to change the world in terms of ecology, human rights, animal rights, etc., right? So in a sense, they'll see a totally different man on YouTube. And my students can come online, my coworkers, and they can see my shirtless selfies, right? I've got fitness videos showing me with my shirt off, flexing my muscles, right? All of that's out here. And again, simultaneously, in some ways, it's the realest and the fakest thing in the world. But that is how I play it. When I talk about keeping it real, I think it's really worthwhile to reflect. This is one of the ways in which keeping it real goes right. In choosing to keep it so real with you guys, that's the only thing that makes it possible for, as I say, for the mask to become the face. That in a very real sense, I'm sharing who I really am, even though it's maybe a more emotional, more performative version of who I really am. And it's a side of me that my coworkers at work would never see, that my teacher here at the school when I'm a student would never see, because I'm both a teacher and a student. You know what I mean? And that's a beautiful thing if you're strong enough to take it. We've had a whole bunch of videos here lately talking about people who have serious emotional disorders, serious intellectual impairments, serious psychological disorders like anorexia and bulimia. And some of those people, probably the smartest decision for them is for them not to do this, not to come on the internet and share their lives because of the risks they're putting themselves at. There are risks for the movement, but it's also just risks for them personally, right? Now, Batman has been mentioned a lot on this channel. As a matter of fact, in older videos talking about the concept of justice and social justice, in terms of how that interacts with activism and veganism and animal rights, I've often challenged people in saying, look, we can't think about justice in the way popular culture icons like Batman lead us to think about justice. We can't think about justice in terms of revenge. And there he is. I mean, Batman is an image of justice linked to mourning and bereavement and sorrow and, his never-ending quest to solve problems with his fists. It's laughable, and yet, we all take it seriously. Batman is a major influential cultural icon. I wanted from day one to be really honest here about the sorrow and the anguish that's behind my veganism, and not to present a phony face of being so happy and so energized. And, I wanted to break away from the fruitarian illusion that life was wonderful and that veganism made you so happy. And, just tell this story. For me, it is not at all about a notion of justice. It's not about a notion of revenge. But I think there is a much simpler and more fundamental notion that probably does relate to the fact that I was brainwashed by comic books as a child like everyone else. It does in some level, I think, tap into my own notion of, human dignity and right and wrong. Some other vegans do criticize me for this behavior. But, to me, this really relates to the ethic behind veganism and even the ethic behind what I'm doing here in the digital vegan demi-monde. When I was walking down the street the other day, things like this have happened to me many times in China. There was yet another car barging its way through a bunch of pedestrians. Right? So this is like the car is basically crashing into people at low speed to break the rules and get through the intersection 30 seconds faster. Right? It's not that interesting a story. There are all kinds of people on this block, at this intersection. There are all kinds of people there who can't stand up for themselves. There are women holding babies. There are elderly people. There are people from different ages and stages of life. There are people there who either can't stand up for themselves or who feel that they can't stand up for themselves. And when a car like this basically threatens to run them over, to barge its way through the pedestrians who are crossing the street, a lot of them just slink out of the way. And I don't. This particular case the other day, I slammed my fist down on the hood of the car. And I was dead center. The car was running into me. It was just running into me at slow speed. And I didn't do that to damage the car, but I put my fist down on the car to make that noise because, it's hollow. It gives a big noise, gets the driver's attention. And the driver was doing that thing. A lot of drivers, when they're doing something wrong, they kind of don't want to look at you. They want to pretend like they don't see you. Dude, I'm huge. I'm 6'3". I'm over 200 pounds, and I'm standing dead center in front of your car. You're going to pretend you don't see me. And, I made this noise by putting my fist down on his car, and I looked him straight in the eye, the driver. I'm not going to say he can't run me over. He can. But I'm not going to make it easy for him. I'm not going to lie down and die, and I'm not going to slink out of the way. I'm not going to jump out of his way. If he wants to kill me, okay, but I'm not going down without a fight. And I know there are all kinds of people right there on that street right then who can't do that because they're carrying their baby, or they're too old, or they're too weak, or they don't have the confidence in terms of maybe dealing with the cops if it happens afterwards. I mean, if that did come to a fight, which I knew it wouldn't, I could see through the windshield this guy wasn't going to stand up to me. But if it came to a fight, guess what I'd tell the cops? Yeah, he crashed into me. He intentionally hit me with his car. What do you expect is going to happen? I don't mind. I don't mind spending a few weeks in a Chinese prison either. Do me a world of good. Language immersion. Fine. Now, again, I'm bringing this back to the contrast with Batman. I'm not actually doing that out of anger. I'm not doing that out of a sense of revenge. I'm not doing it even out of a sense of my own dignity. Like, this driver, you have to respect me. I'm actually doing it because I want this driver to respect everyone. I don't just want him to not run over me. I don't just want him to not run over the guy who's big enough and tough enough to threaten to kick his ass if he doesn't fucking put on the brakes when he knows he's wrong and he knows he should just wait for the light to change. I want him to respect everyone, including or especially the people who can't stand up for themselves. And on a really deep level, I do think that's behind veganism. Veganism as opposed to reducitarianism. Veganism as opposed to just vaguely donating money to Greenpeace or the Green Party, being ecologically aware, but still eating milk and animal products now and then. When you say no, if I don't stand up for the cows who live and die their whole fucking lives in a world of steel and concrete, who will? Okay, I've met people, I've talked about this before, I've met people who are physically disabled and they've got to eat whatever the nurse in the hospital gives them. I know people now who are in hospital with different conditions and they got to eat whatever the hospital gives them. They don't have a choice. Either that or they try to find a new hospital, right? There are people who are on military service in a submarine and they got to eat whatever food the military gives them in the submarine, whatever. Okay, there are people. I'm not any of those people. If I don't stand up, there are other people on that block crossing that street who can't stand up. If I don't stand up, who will? Okay? And I look at all you motherfuckers and ask that question. I look at the other people in my school, the other students. I look at my teachers. Say, why don't you stand up for what's right? If you know this is right. And this is, I don't know, compared to punching a car that's trying to run you over, refusing to eat dairy milk, refusing to eat yogurt. It's not that much to ask. It's not that much of a risk. You don't have to be that tough a guy to say, even if I'm going to go hungry, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to eat this shit that I know is bad for the ecology of the planet. It's bad for the animals. It's even bad for my own health. All right? You don't. To take that stand in the grocery store or in the restaurant, it's not asking that much. And most of these people who are conformists are fucking cowards. And with that example, with the car, when I looked into the eyes of the driver, he had his girlfriend or his wife next to him in the next seat, and I could read his face like a book. I've lived in Chinese culture for a long time, so I'm very used to reading expressions on Chinese people's faces. The expression on his face was exactly one of fear and, in a sense, guilt, because he knew he was in the wrong in terms of what he was doing with his car, and of not wanting to let his girlfriend see. Of not wanting to let his girlfriend see that he was terrified of me and of what I was going to do next, if I was going to come over to his window or what. And of course, he stopped. He stopped his car. I mean, he stopped fucking slow-mo running people over this fucking intersection. And, just say, I mean, this is not an experience I've had once. I've had experiences like this, roughly similar many, many times while I've been in China. And I've had some experiences that were worse in Canada, actually. But here in China, now a couple of weeks ago, I really got emotionally hit by it because it's linked to this. It's linked to this kind of normal, not quite daily struggle as part of my life. But, I just saw a guy walking down the road. Actually, one of the same roads you guys have seen on camera on this channel. Really messed up road where you got motorcycles almost crashing into you, and it's just a messed up road here. There's construction going on. There was a blind man walking down that same road where I walk all the time, and you could tell right away he wasn't just someone who lost his sight. He was blind from birth, and he had the walking stick, and he had another walking stick coming out of his backpack with a red flag on it, to try to make him more visible, try to prevent cars or motorcycles from just barging into him. And as modest and miserable and ineffectual as our little ways are of standing up for what's right, not everybody can do it. I can. Can you? I got a piece of fan mail that got to me a little bit from a guy who I do really regard as very smart, if I thought he was an idiot, I'd say he's an idiot, guys. You know that about me. I got a piece of fan mail from another vegan who I do regard as highly intelligent. And he said to me straight up, the reason why he supports me, in my career, my long-term aspirations to eventually get involved with real activism, with, veganism as a real movement, as we hope it exists in the future as a real movement. He said straight up that the reason why he supports me is that he feels that he's not smart enough to do what I do, here on YouTube. I don't know. I mean, he said more than that, this message, obviously, but he said he really had these high hopes for my future as a political leader in veganism because he knows he can't do what I'm already doing and what he sees in my future for me being capable of doing. He has these aspirations for me. So it's, it's a meaningful email. He's not a stranger. He's been following my career on YouTube here for a couple of years or something. And, you got to sit there and look at that and look in the mirror and look back at all these issues, the realness and the fakeness and the potential and the hopelessness of what we're all doing here on YouTube, in some ways in rehearsing, a political and social movement, a rehearsal for, this movement that doesn't yet exist. I think that one of the beautiful things about veganism is that you don't need to be very intelligent to do it. You don't need to be brilliant. In a sense, you don't even need to be courageous or strong. This is something almost everybody can do. And that's why I feel so comfortable preaching it. I don't preach rock climbing. Who can do rock climbing? A tiny minority. I don't even preach riding a bicycle. Not everybody can ride a bicycle. There's so many things added on to veganism that I don't preach. But I do feel like veganism is for everybody, or it's for almost everybody, if you're not on that desert island, et cetera, et cetera. And veganism is such a simple idea. A child can understand it. A child can understand the reasons why we do it. That's not true of a lot of other political and ethical claims, what have you. We were just looking at these excuses made today by Vegan Cheetah, formerly a supporter of this channel, now someone who hates it, where he was saying that veganism is not possible and is not practical, and we should be accepting of people who can't do it, people who eat meat once a week or once a month or once a day or whatever, that we should be broadening veganism to be more accepting of people. And, I see it in the exact diametric opposite way. Exactly what I'm interested in is meeting people who are good enough and smart enough and strong enough to take that stand, whether they find it difficult or whether they find it easy. And in a real sense, none of us know what it takes. None of us know what it takes because veganism is still so much in the experimental stage. Nobody would have said from day one that, the major debates within veganism would have been masturbation versus nofap. Can you guys remember that? Within the last 2 years, that tore the vegan community apart. Masturbation versus the nofap movement. That it would be bicycles versus no bicycles. These, anorexics versus non-anorexics. Crazy, crazy debates within veganism. But, in practice, as this can of tomato soup rolls down the staircase, step by step, we get to see who's got what it takes and who don't. I said from day one with the court challenge to Durian Rider, I had absolutely no confidence that I would win the case. I had absolutely no confidence that there would be outcomes. But it was nevertheless so important to do the right thing, to at least put in the paperwork. And now we've had 6 months of litigation, with no outcome, and it's still totally possible that this is going to end after months and months of litigation with no outcome. It's totally possible. But at that time, I got fan mail from the people who themselves were also victimized by Durian Rider and who wanted to do what I did, who wanted to stand up to him, but they couldn't. They couldn't, or they felt they couldn't, or they didn't, right? And, if anyone had asked off the bat, if anyone had started from a blank piece of paper, what does it take for vegans to get off their asses and get organized as a movement? Absolutely nobody would have drawn up a schematic diagram of what's gone on here on YouTube in the last 2 years. And I hate to say it, but I was reading even more academic publications lately for veganism. If you think that the debates within YouTube are crazy, the stuff going on in the peer-reviewed academic literature is crazier. It's worse. The supposedly respectable world of animal rights activism is a fucking nuthouse. It's for another video, man, and I've already commented on that in other videos. It's worse. It's way more out of touch with reality. But that's really my message for this video. I think it's easy for people to lose sight of. That's why people quit YouTube. That's why people quit the movement. People lose the hope and aspirations for what they came on here and started doing this in the first place. On that most basic level, at some point in your life, you realize the difference between right and wrong and what it means for your diet and what it means for industrialized agriculture and all the rest of it. And something in you wanted to come on the internet and share that part of your life. And in some ways it's real and in some ways it's fake, as I've already talked about at length. But that's part of who you really are. And your coworkers never get to see it. And probably a lot of your family members never get to see it. Maybe your grandparents, maybe your brothers and sisters. In terms of why you care about veganism, why you want to see veganism progress as a movement. And in terms of that long, slow sense of outrage that you carry with you every day of your life, maybe nobody else ever sees it. Maybe your own boyfriend or your own girlfriend doesn't see it if you're in a relationship with someone who eats meat. That rage and that aspiration for a better tomorrow. At some point, even if your channel is the phoniest shit on YouTube, that made you want to pick up a camera and come out here and talk. That sense of, I want to stand up and be counted. Don't ever lose touch with that. Because if you're here for the money, there's no money. If you're here for the fame, there's no fame. And if you're even here for activism, there's almost no activism. This is hollow as a drum, right? But that's still something really real. And like I said in that message, my life, I've dealt with extreme isolation when I was living in Cambodia, living in Laos, living whatever. But there's also a sense in which, doesn't matter, maybe I move to Da Hong and I make 5 or 10 great friends. I assure you, even if I make those friends and they're local Chinese people who don't speak English, whatever the story is, there's a sense in which they will never know me. They will never know who I really am, even to that weird extent to which you guys, if you've watched a few of these long videos, you do know who I really am. And even if the only thing we share is that aspiration to live in a world where the economy isn't dominated by this deeply immoral and ecologically destructive and nutritionally unnecessary industry, the slaughterhouse industry, even if that is the only thing we share, I've just got to beg you to look past all the bullshit, all of the mutual hatred that so totally defines what we do here on YouTube. And think about where you're going to be 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Because I want to be there with you. Morty, cut the lights. That's a wrap. That's a hard out.